Hey, God bless you. This is Missions 102, Practical Issues in Missions Part 2, and this is session number 5. And in this session, we're going to kind of recapitulate the past 2 sessions that we talked about. We talked about you, the missionary, and the mission field of where you're going to be going. And hopefully that encouraged you. I know that you could put that in your pocket and keep it because you're going to need it when you get to where God's called you. And this one, we're going to talk about the preparation. This also is pretty neat and something that you're going to need. Preparation, how God is preparing you to be where you're going to be, and really how it works. And I just want to kind of start off with another little testimony from myself. When I was little, we used to go to the beach all the time. I grew up in Central Florida, about 20 minutes from the beach, and 5 minutes from springs. Had springs everywhere, had a pool near us, and man, I always swimming, always in the sun, always swimming. Loved to be outside. But as a little boy, I didn't know how to swim, and I would always want to swim. I see my brother and my sisters and my cousins all out in the water in the deep end and playing in the waves, and then you got me, little old Sean. It's a little now. Little old Sean is paddling around in the shallow end and the kiddie part, and it just wasn't fun. But we went every weekend, and I remember always desiring to swim. And when I was about 6 years old, the Parks and Recreation near us took us to one of the springs, and before we could actually be involved in swimming outside of the kiddie area, we needed to pass the swimming test. And so everybody had to take the swimming test, and they threw us in, and one at a time, and so they could monitor us and we could make it or sink or swim. And they put me in, and man, come to find out, surprisingly, I passed the test. I was blown away. I said, man, I can't believe I passed the test. So I got to swim outside of the kiddie area. I was like, man, I knew how to swim. But I thought about it, and I'm thinking about it even today. What prepared me to be able to pass that test? Was it playing around in the kiddie part or in the shallow end of the ocean? Was that what prepared me? Possibly being used to the water, always being in the water and loving the water. It's possible preparation. But you know what really prepared me? It was about a week and a half before I went to the pool with my cousins, and I always talked about how I wanted to get in the deep end with them. And I remember one of my cousins, she picked me up and she threw me in. And it's either die or swim. And I swam to the side and got out. But that really prepared me for that week and a half more when I went to go take that swim test, and I came to find out that I could swim. See, I was already prepared. And I want to tell you that the best preparation that you're going to face is sure learn the language, sure take these classes, sure do what you need to do to study the culture. Learn all these things. Do your part. But really what's going to prepare you is when you get thrown in. You get thrown in amongst the people. We just learned about swimming. No, I'm just kidding. We talked about how God uses situations, the shallow end and being thrown in to prepare you. So do what you need to do to prepare for the field, but also know that God's doing what He needs to do to prepare you. And we're going to look at one of the most famous verses when it comes to the missionary and his call to certain people. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. And it says in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, Isaiah says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me." Isaiah is excited. He says, I want to go. And there's an excitement to that. And really, we're going to look at some insights. Number one, we see that Isaiah was in the presence of God. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. He was in God's presence. The power of God, the glory of God was there. And then God communicated to him. God spoke to him. God shared His burden for the peoples and for the word of God to get to the peoples. And then you see number 3, Isaiah willingly surrendered to that. He desired to please God, not just obedience. Obedience was a part of it, but really to see and to please God. Isaiah really didn't know what he was getting himself into, did he? He just wanted to please God. And then you see number 5, what prepared Isaiah to be able to go and share the word of the Lord with the nation of Israel? What was his preparation? Did he say, all right, Isaiah, I'm calling you. Now listen, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to school. I need you to become a scribe. I need you to learn the Torah. And then I want you to... No. He was in the school of God. Look at verse 7. That's what prepared him. Verse 7 says, he touched my mouth and with it and said, behold, this has touched your lip, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven. That's what qualified him. God. God in his mercy and his greatness and his preparation for us to be able to show his glory. God prepared him for the mercy and for the ability to serve him as a missionary. God did. Sure, Isaiah had shallow ends that helped him and prepare him and there and here, but he always threw right in and realized that the throwing into the field that God had already given him what he needed to be able to do what he needed to do. Sure, take steps to do your part in preparation. As I said before, learn the language, learn the culture, learn what they believe, learn how they believe it and why they believe it. So do your part, but know that what best prepares you in life for the mission field and for the ministry is your life given to God, your life in the hand of God, your life letting God touch you in the presence of God and letting God do work in you and teach you along the way. So we talked about how God uses the deep end and also God uses the shallow end of our lives. God uses our preparation as we are faithful to prepare, as we know how to prepare and are intelligent and wisdom, prepare for the field. And also God uses the deep end, the throwing in, the God things that only he can do. And both are very important for you as the missionary to be able to be where God has called you. And I just want to use another example out of the book, The Servant on the Edge of History. Missionary Sam James and his family were missionaries to the nation of Vietnam during the war, and it's a very wonderful book, and you need to pick it up. You need to get it. You're going to need it. You're going to use it a lot, and it's going to be encouraging. You're going to pass it on. It's probably the best book I've ever read. Not just an autobiography, but it's really just tools that are pretty practical for you to be able to be effective where you're going. And so Sam James and his family, they left San Francisco on a boat and they ended up in Hong Kong 3 weeks later. So imagine being on a ship for 3 weeks with 3 little babies, 3 years and younger. And they were below on the deck, and man, it was horrible. They get to Hong Kong and they decided to get a little hotel, a Chinese hotel, so that they can stay there and kind of get refreshed for a couple nights. And they thought that they would pick up their visa to Vietnam and be able to be on their way within the week. And it just wasn't happening. Their visa wasn't ready, and they just didn't understand. They said, "What's wrong with the visa? Why ain't it ready?" And kind of find out they got denied, and Sam got really frustrated. And he had this choice either to go back or to just kind of just hang out and just trust the Lord. Well, they hung out and trusted the Lord, praise God. And in the hanging out, they just was getting more frustrated. They got a couple months later, they got another letter from the Vietnam embassy, Vietnam government, saying that by no purpose, no means will they ever be accepted to be able to be allowed into the country. This was detrimental. This was really harsh. And by this time, Sam James and his family had already been there for several months. And Sam had to begin to get involved in doing pastoral training for pastors and teaching and being a pastor himself at a local congregation for missionaries. And God began to use him. And difficult, staying in this one room flat, Chinese style, food bad, very different, 3 little babies. And just hard on them. Well, they prayed and prayed and prayed And eventually God supernaturally, miraculously gave them a visa to be able to go. And that time was so difficult. It was really hinged, and it seemed as though it was wasted. It seemed as though it was just a bad time and quickly to be forgotten about. But later on, Sam James really looked back, he reflected, and he said this was one of those experiences that taught us that no matter how dark the situation seems, God always has something he is trying to teach us. God has a way of showing when his timing is right and when he has made us ready to fulfill that calling in accordance with his will. So he learned that God was preparing him for the field, and when God was finished with him, that it was the perfect time for him to be on the field. And I want to tell you, you can't rush God's time. You can't rush the school of God. Sure, do your training, do your equipping, but know that your life is in the hand of God. God's going to use you. And just like Isaiah declared, Lord, here I am, send me. Sure, be willing, desire to serve God, desire to honor him. But like so many that answer that call, you got to realize that God uses the shallow end and the deep end, so that when you get there, you're successful and you say, man, I'm prepared. I know how to swim. I know how to be successful. I'm God's missionary for these people. God's prepared me. He's done it. God bless you.